would like to say that I actually got my start in scientific research and inquiry by reading a Scientific American journal when I was in high school. And I'm going to weave that a little bit into some of my remarks because it did make a huge impression, so I appreciate very much this magazine. I did not know it went back to 1845. We're here today because we're trying to get at why so many young people don't share the same passion that we have for science, engineering, math subjects, and figure out what we can do at this critical junction of our country in terms of inspiring them to take the next level in terms of their intellectual inquiry into these fascinating subjects. I can tell you that science and engineering informs just about everything we do at the Department of Energy, and Secretary Chu is adamant about that. We're simply not going to make any decisions that aren't firmly rooted in science, and the truth is just about every major road to economic, environmental, quality and improvement runs through science and engineering, so it's a great place to be right now. Just want to summarize the three policies, energy policies of the Obama administration, because I think that'll show some of the challenges and why it's so important that we in this next decade come up with a solution of attracting the best and brightest into this field. First one, there's climate. And the president has called for an 83% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, which means that we need to take our energy from being 85% carbon and 15% non-carbon and flip it. So by 2050, we're 85% non-carbon or low carbon and 15% carbon. And business as usual, if you look at the Engineering Information Administration, or EIA 2010 outlook, we're looking at business as usual would keep us at 78% fossil. So it's a big challenge. So that's the first priority. The second one is energy security. Right now, we import nearly 60% of the 20 million barrels of oil we consume every day. And most of those are in transportation. I think it's over 90% now is in applied to transportation. So that means that we are really going to have to change the mode and the way we use energy in terms of transportation for our oil security. And that amounts to a good fraction of $1 trillion annually from our import-export deficit. And finally, there's the economy and the manufacturing sector that powered our country to its economic stardom that we've enjoyed up until very recently is now at an all-time low in terms of its contribution to GDP. It's at about 16%, which is the lowest since the 1950s when it was as high as 28%. So the thread that runs through these priorities is finding smarter ways to produce and use energy. And Secretary Chu, my boss at the Department of Energy, likes to talk about clean energy is the industrial revolution of our particular time. How do we grow the very successful programs in the country that have shown inroads into getting young people into science and engineering and make sure that they are endemic or viral in the colloquial expression of our time? So let's talk a little bit about the challenge of timing, funding, and scale with regard to our educational enterprise. We estimate in the next 5 years, actually the Center for Energy Workforce Development estimates the next 5 years 40 to 60% of our energy workforce will be of retirement age. And this comes at a time when the U.S., although we enjoy the highest number of college degrees per capita broadly, in the 24 to 35 demographic, we're not even ranked in the top 10 of certificates or degrees in that particular demographic. In the Rising Above the Gathering Storm, it was noted that only 18% of our high school students could pass a technology proficiency test and only 1% excelled. And then we could also mention, I know that Bruce didn't want to talk about these statistics, but that's only because I know you didn't want to steal the thunder of everybody else's talk, but only about 6% of those pursuing college studies are going into engineering fields. Before I was Undersecretary of Energy, I was Dean of the Pratt School of Engineering at Duke University. And in my first year there, almost 30% of the entering first-year class left at the end of the year. I didn't take it personally, but I thought about it. And then the end of the second year, we had, roughly about another 10 to 20%. So we were at about 40 to 50% attrition after 2 years. And when you consider that not every graduate actually pursues a career in engineering, this is bad in terms of the pipeline. Now, what I was told is that these were kids that just couldn't hack it. They just didn't have the skills. When I went back and polled, which is something that our secretary reinforces, go back to the original data. We pulled every single incoming GPA and SAT score, and we found that actually we were losing the best. We were losing the kids that had 790 and 800 SAT scores. And it's pretty simple why. Our curriculum was pretty boring. It was boring because we bring kids in that want to understand the joy of engineering, design, creativity, and we put them into classes where they're learning the basics of math and science, which can be stimulated by that love by applying it in a concurrent way of education, but we started out without motivating the students. So we went back and we re-engineered, if you will, our curriculum. And we started out by looking at the whole instead of the parts. So right now in engineering, you'll take a lot of parts. You'll take math, you'll take chemistry, you take physics. Then you might build up and say, okay, what happens if I put two transistors together? Well, I can talk about circuits, then I can go into signal processing, and eventually by the fourth year, and students having either cabin fever or spring fever, they're ready to get out. We expect in one class, usually called the capstone design class, that they're going to magically integrate everything they learned over 4 years, and that just does not happen. So the first questions that the faculty posed was, how many songs do you think you can store on the iPod? How many songs do you want to store? So well, we want to store, songs with perfect fidelity and perfect representation of the musical piece. Well, that's great, because with that kind of infinite resolution, you maybe store 10 songs. Oh no, we want more than 10 songs. We want 10,000 songs. So then we could teach something about compression. We could teach something about signal processing, harmonics, distortion, and pretty soon they were interested in then the fundamentals of the physics and the math behind these particular subjects. It was a great success, if only the fact that it was actually on Sunday morning, so I count that as a success, and really captured the imagination of all the students in a way of creating the interest in the curriculum. And it was just that little light bulb that went off, that science and engineering is like magic. So I think starting out with teachers, we estimate that 2/3 of the students that are studying chemistry and physics in U.S. high schools are taught by teachers with no formal training in these subjects. So one proposal to remedy this situation was prepared in 2005 by the National Academies in a report that was entitled 10,000 Teachers, 10,000 Minds. And it recommended recruiting 10,000 new science and math teachers each year for K-12 institutions through the competitive award of scholarships in math, science, and engineering that leads to a degree, a bachelor's degree in these fields. In a follow-up to that report, the National Science Foundation established the Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program, which provides funding to institutions of higher education to support scholarships and stipends and academic background for students that would pursue STEM degrees and then go teach in high-need K-12 school districts. It's a great program, and if you're not familiar with it, I'd encourage you to look it up on the web. And this comes back to, I think, a strategy that it would allow us to scale these programs, and that really is an issue of affordability. It's really a perfect storm in universities right now, with endowments dropping, with the economy such that we cannot raise tuition, and with families unable to afford the tuition that is already set. That if we put investments, major investments, into scholarships and opportunities for kids to go to school to study these subjects, they will come. And I think that personally, from my own experience, the students I would interview when they go to Duke, I'd say, why did you go into engineering? They say, oh, I had a parent, a mother or father that was an engineer. This is our middle class. If we lose the middle class, we will lose engineering. And vice versa, without engineering, I don't think we're going to have a middle class in this country. So it's something that I'm quite passionate about. To have children emerge from college with a $100,000 debt even before they take their first job is a challenge of funding and also scale. So I would just stress that as we go through this is not to forget that we need to reach out to all our young people and ensure that we have models and role models and mentors that reflect who they are, because that will attract them into the fields. So I just thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about what the Department of Energy is doing to try and support all of our efforts for the second decade. And this is something that has my highest priority in the Department of Energy. And so I look forward to working with you to try and make an impact on what our country will need in the future in terms of an energy literate workforce. Thank you very much.